I just still think it's worth unpacking, Tim, what happened on the Hill today in this assertion that the FBI is a readout of liberals intent on targeting conservatives. It bears mentioning that FBI Director Chris Wray is a member of the Federalist Society who clerked for Michael Luttig. He is a dyed-in-the-wool conservative, and I'd love your sort of assessment about how deep the deep state may be in the trenches of liberalism, given, you know, the claims that were made on Capitol Hill today.
Yeah. As Chris Wray himself said, Alex, repeatedly today, the narrative that the FBI is somehow full of liberal, deep state, anti-Trump, anti-conservatives is ludicrous. Chris Wray is a pro. I disagree with Chris probably on a lot of issues, but I respect his integrity, as I do all of the men and women in the FBI who, in my experience as a former prosecutor, go about their very important work with a great deal of integrity. They do, though, sometimes make mistakes. And the tragedy of a hearing like today is that we're spending all of this time on these ludicrous issues of political theater. And we're not talking about real issues like how the FBI gathers information about domestic violent extremism. Do they efficiently share information with others? Do they put undue restrictions, First Amendment restrictions, free association restrictions on their ability to monitor open source information? Or is there an assessment of danger when it comes to intelligence afflicted with some implicit racial bias? These are huge issues that our work, I think, identified. None of them absolve the former president and his co-conspirators who caused the riot. But those conditions of law enforcement and how the FBI and other agencies prepare for and manage these events really deserve attention. And we're not talking about that because we're going through this charade of the FBI has somehow been weaponized or as part of the deep state. That, as Christopher Wray said, is ludicrous, and it prevents real discussion about important issues.
Well, and I would also say not only is it missing the point, it may be even slightly more malignant than that, which is the few former, the few former people who've been from law enforcement who've been charged in January 6th aren't there as liberal, like Democrat plants. They are there as actors working in support of Trump and his ends. I think Jared Wise, former FBI bureau supervisor, charged in January 6th. Mark Ibrahim, an active duty DEA agent at the time of his arrest. Thomas Caldwell, who claims he's a former section chief for the FBI. I mean, these people were working in law enforcement and they were rioting on January 6th. And my question to you, Tim, and then also to you, Mary, is to what degree is the department aware of the bad actors within its ranks who may be furthering the causes of the former president?
Yeah, Alex, there's no question that there were some current and former members of law enforcement in the crowd who believed that the election had been stolen, who believed that false narrative. But it is completely ridiculous to suggest that the FBI in any way instigated, caused, somehow motivated the riot. We looked very hard for evidence of that and found absolutely none, as Director Wray said today. I think law enforcement does need to get serious about extremism in its ranks and as a recruiting matter and as a training matter, ensure that they're doing all they can to ensure that the men and women that they bring in are not bringing some warped ideology into their very important responsibility. I think they get that and are on that. But this notion that they are either part of the deep state helping liberals or were somehow instigating the riot as a false flag operation is not based in fact whatsoever.
Mary, are we getting better at policing extremism within the ranks of our own law enforcement agencies?
Well, we're certainly calling attention to it, and I think certain law enforcement departments are getting better about it. I mean, one of the things that I've been, trying to spread the word on as much as possible over the last couple of years is that, yes, police officers have First Amendment rights, but those rights are not limitless. And even when they're speaking in their personal capacity about matters of public concern, if their speech or their activity or their association undermines the mission of the police department, the law enforcement agency that they're members of, they can be disciplined, including firing. The courts have been very clear about that for decades. So I think sometimes law enforcement hides behind the First Amendment as a reason not to take action against extremism. And that's just wrong as a matter of law. There's substantial leeway there, just as there is in the military. And yet what we're seeing now is even in admirable efforts in the military to crack down on this, you're now actually seeing attachments to the National Defense Authorization Act, which is something, critical piece of legislation that will need to be passed this year. We're seeing amendments to that to try to dismantle those efforts within the military to eradicate extremism. So for every step forward, it seems like there's folks on Capitol Hill that want to take a few steps backward.
Well, yeah, I mean, and a lot of them Republicans, right? The very people who have committees dedicated to the weaponization of the federal government. The irony is too thick to slice. Tim Heaphy, Mary McCord, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Alex.